You're standing in a tomb, sealed for 4,000 years, the air thick with dust and secrets. Your flashlight catches a golden mask, its eyes hollow, staring through you. You reach for the linen-wrapped remains of a young king, and a chill runs down your spine. Not from the cold, but from a truth that claws at your mind. This boy, barely 19, didn't die from war or betrayal. His death was written in his blood, poisoned by a lineage that married brother to sister, generation after generation, believing they were gods preserving divinity. But they weren't gods. They were prisoners of their own obsession, their bodies crumbling under the weight of a lie. Welcome to the dark heart of Egypt's royal bloodline, where divine ambition bred human catastrophe. You're about to descend into a history so forbidden, so twisted, it will change how you see power forever. This isn't just a story, it's a warning etched in the bones of pharaohs, a truth they buried in golden sarcophagi to keep from the world. The ancient Egyptians, masters of pyramids and mathematics, built an empire that awed humanity. Yet their greatest rulers, the ones they called living gods, orchestrated their own destruction through a practice they believed would make them eternal: inbreeding. They thought their blood was too sacred to mix with mortals. They thought their lineage was divine. They were wrong, and the price of their error wasn't just their own suffering, it was the slow, deliberate collapse of their dynasties, child by child, king by king. Picture the first pharaoh who looked at his sister and saw not just family, but the only vessel worthy of his divine seed. He wasn't driven by love or lust, but by a conviction so deep it blinded him to reason. His priests, draped in linen and gold, nodded in approval. His advisors whispered of political strength, of a bloodline untainted by the common. No one spoke of the children who would pay the price. No one dared question the gods. The pharaohs believed they were Horus incarnate, descendants of Ra, too holy to mingle with the farmers and labourers who toiled under their rule. To marry outside the family was to dilute divinity, to risk the wrath of the heavens. So they turned inward, brother to sister, father to daughter, sealing their fate with every sacred vow. This wasn't a one-time mistake, it was a system, a 3,000-year experiment in genetic isolation that turned palaces into laboratories of suffering. The first generation might have seemed fine, a slight oddity in a child's face, a jaw that didn't align. The priest called these signs of divine favour, proof of the gods' approval. But the poison was already pooling. Each sibling marriage doubled the odds of defective genes surfacing like cracks in a foundation no one could see. By the second generation, the cracks widened. Children born with crooked spines, weakened hearts, or minds that flickered like a dying flame. By the third, the damage was undeniable, yet the priests spun it as holy. A clubfoot was a mark of Ra. A stillborn heir was a soul called to the afterlife. The suffering was divine, they said, and the pharaohs believed it. Imagine being one of these royal children raised in a golden cage, taught your blood is sacred, yet your body betrays you. Your legs tremble under the weight of a throne you can barely sit upon. Your breath catches in a chest that never formed right. You're told you're a god, but you feel like a prisoner in your own skin. The palace is alive with whispers, servants who avert their eyes, advisors who speak in careful riddles. You see your siblings, your mirror, their faces echoing your own deformities. You're told it's your duty to marry them, to continue the sacred line. No one explains why your cousins die before their first birthday, why your sister's pregnancies end in tiny succulent tombs. You don't know genetics, science is millennia away, but you know something is wrong. And deep down, you know it's because of the blood you were born with. The Egyptians were brilliant. They mapped the stars, engineered wonders that still stand, yet they couldn't see the truth staring them in the face. Their court physicians recorded every symptom: malformed bones, early deaths, barren wombs, but their faith blinded them. The gods demanded purity, and purity demanded sacrifice, so they sacrificed their children generation after generation to a lie they called divinity. The royal tombs became time capsules of tragedy, each mummy a testament to a truth they refused to acknowledge. The pharaohs thought they were building eternal legacies. Instead, they were crafting their own extinction. This wasn't just a mistake of ignorance. It was a system of control, a psychological prison built on divine propaganda. The priests and advisors weren't just enablers. They were architects of a myth that kept the royal family chained to their own destruction. To question the practice was to question the gods, and to question the gods was to undermine the entire empire. So the lie persisted, century after century, as the royal bloodline grew weaker, sicker, more broken. The people worshipped their pharaohs as infallible, but the truth was carved into their very bodies. Divinity was a death sentence. As we descend deeper into this forbidden history, you'll see how this obsession with purity didn't just destroy bodies, it warped minds, twisted politics, and shaped the fate of an empire. You're not just hearing a story, you're uncovering a truth that was meant to stay buried, a truth that challenges everything you thought you knew about power, faith, and the cost of believing lies. This is the rabbit hole, and you're already falling. Are you ready to see how deep it goes? You're deeper now, standing in the shadow of a truth that feels like a blade against your throat. The air grows heavier, the walls of this ancient tomb closing in as we uncover the next layer of Egypt's forbidden history. The pharaohs didn't just stumble into their genetic nightmare. They built it brick by gilded brick, convinced their blood was too sacred to share. But what happens when a god-king's body betrays him in ways no priest can explain away? What happens when the lie of divinity stares back from a deformed reflection? You're about to meet a pharaoh who dared to challenge the gods, only to find the real curse was in his veins. In the blistering heat of 1353 BCE, a boy is born in a palace overlooking the Nile, his cries echoing through halls of alabaster and gold. His name is Akhenaten, and he will become Egypt's heretic king, the one who broke the old gods for a new vision. But before he's a revolutionary, he's a child trapped in a body that screams its imperfection. His skull stretches unnaturally, elongated like a distorted shadow. His hips curve warrior-wide feminine, his chest swollen in ways that shame him. Servants lower their eyes as he passes, not out of reverence, but to hide their pity. Courtiers whisper encoded phrases, their words a veil over the obvious. This prince is not divine. He's a living contradiction of everything the palace claims. Growing up, Akhenaten sees the temple paintings, pharaohs with broad shoulders, chiseled jaws, the embodiment of godly strength. His reflection in polished bronze shows no such thing. His walk is unsteady, his voice strange, his body a puzzle no one dares solve. Other royal children, bound by the same cursed blood, watch him with a mix of fear and recognition. They too bear the marks of their lineage, odd features, fragile frames, lives cut short before they begin. The palace is a theatre of silence where every servant knows the truth but speaks only in worship. The priests spin tales of divine favour, claiming his strange form is a gift from Ra, a sign of his unique destiny. His parents, products of the same sibling unions, nod in agreement, blind to the genetic poison they've passed on. By the time Akhenaten takes the throne, he's had enough of the lies. He does something no pharaoh before him dared. He orders his artist to tell the truth. For the first time in Egyptian history, royal art shows the royal family as they are. Elongated skulls, protruding bellies, bodies that defy the divine ideal. Historians call it an artistic revolution, but it's simpler, darker. Akhenaten is tired of pretending. If he's a god, then the gods must look like him. Broken, strange, human. The sculptures from his reign are haunting, almost alien. A family frozen in their genetic decay. His wife Nefertiti bears daughters who share the same distorted features, their delicate frames hiding the same curse. Sons die in infancy, their tiny bodies too weak to carry the weight of their lineage. The palace whispers of princesses who shun sunlight, their frail forms hidden from the world. Akhenaten's rebellion goes deeper than art. He rejects Egypt's pantheon, declaring a single god, the Aten, the sun disk, as the sole deity. He moves the capital to Amarna, a desert city far from the traditional temples, isolating his family in a gilded cage of their own making. Is this revolution born of faith or desperation? Did he see the old gods as the architects of his suffering, their demands for pure blood a curse he could no longer bear? By worshipping one god, he makes himself the sole interpreter of divine will, cutting out the priests who justified his family's destruction. But no god, new or old, can rewrite the code in his cells. Amarna becomes a monument to futility, its art documenting a family's ruin while proclaiming their divinity. The heretic king dies young, his body failing as his ancestors did. His revolution crumbles, his city abandoned, his name erased from monuments by priests eager to restore the old order. But the genetic curse lives on, passed to his son, a boy who will become Egypt's most famous tragedy. Tutankhamun, born in 1341 BCE, enters the world already broken. At 9, he ascends the throne, his left foot twisted inward, a club foot that makes every step a battle. His spine curves unnaturally, forcing him into painful contortions just to sit on his golden throne. His chest is malformed, each breath a labour in the desert heat. Palace physicians hover, their potions useless against the enemy within his DNA. Over 30 walking sticks are found in his tomb, not symbols of power, but lifelines for a boy who could barely walk. Tutankhamun is worshipped as a god, yet he's a prisoner of his body. Servants prop him up during ceremonies, their chants of divine strength drowning out the truth of his weakness. His wife, Ankhesenamun, is his half-sister, her blood as poisoned as his. Their attempts at children end in miscarriages and stillbirths. Tiny mummies buried in silence, proof of a lineage too broken to continue. The boy king grows up surrounded by images of perfect pharaohs, yet he knows he's nothing like them. Court artists paint him as divine, but their stylized portraits can't hide the reality. He's a genetic catastrophe, a god who can't save himself. At 19, a simple infection, malaria, claims him. A healthy body might have fought it off, but Tutankhamun's immune system, ravaged by inbreeding, surrenders. As he lies dying, does he understand what his physicians cannot? That his suffering wasn't the will of the gods, but the consequence of a lie his ancestors lived for centuries. His tomb, discovered intact in 1922, makes him famous, not for his reign, but for the truth his body reveals. DNA analysis in 2010 confirms what the priests could never admit. He was the product of sibling incest, his every ailment a symptom of a bloodline turned toxic. This is the halfway point, where the weight of this knowledge sinks in. You're not just watching history, you're seeing through the veil of power into the raw human cost of obsession. I want you to pause, feel the gravity of what you've learned, and claim this moment. In the comments, write "break the bloodline" twice. It's a symbol of shattering the lies that bind us, a signal to the algorithm that you're awake, ready for the deeper truths. Do it now and let's keep descending. The pharaohs thought they could defy nature, that their blood was above the laws of life. They were wrong, and their children paid the price. But this tragedy isn't confined to Akhenaten or Tutankhamun. It's a pattern, a cycle of destruction that repeats across millennia, each dynasty falling into the same trap. As we move forward, you'll see how this obsession with purity didn't just break bodies, it broke empires, and its echoes reach into the present. You're holding dangerous knowledge now, the kind that makes you question every system that demands blind loyalty. Stay with me. The rabbit hole goes deeper. You've crossed the threshold now, deeper into the abyss of Egypt's hidden truth, where the air feels like it's pressing against your chest. The golden masks and the grand temples are fading, replaced by the raw, unfiltered reality of a bloodline poisoned by its own arrogance. You've seen the boy king Tutankhamun broken by the weight of his divine curse, and Akhenaten, the heretic who tried to rewrite the gods but couldn't escape his genes. Now we descend further to the final chapter of this genetic tragedy, where a foreign dynasty takes Egypt's throne and doubles down on the same deadly obsession. This is the story of Cleopatra, the last pharaoh, and the Macedonian rulers who turned inbreeding into a 250-year experiment in human destruction. You're not just learning history, you're uncovering a truth that shakes the foundations of power itself. In 323 BCE, Alexander the Great dies, his empire fracturing like glass. His general Ptolemy seizes Egypt, a land of ancient gods and golden tombs. He's a Macedonian, a foreigner, but he's no fool. He sees the temple walls, the carvings of pharaohs marrying their sisters, and he decides this is the key to power. To rule Egypt, he must become Egypt, not just its king, but its god. So he adopts their sacred tradition, marrying his sister to keep the bloodline pure. His descendants follow suit generation after generation, creating a dynasty so intertwined it becomes a genetic labyrinth. Brothers marry sisters, cousins marry cousins, until the family tree is no longer a tree but a tangled noose, strangling each new heir with the sins of their ancestors. Picture the palace in Alexandria, gleaming under the Mediterranean sun, a beacon of wealth and power. Inside, royal children grow up knowing their fate is sealed. They play together as siblings, laugh together as friends, then find themselves forced into marriage beds as teenagers. The psychological weight is crushing. These aren't distant alliances with foreign royalty. These are intimate bonds twisted into obligation. A sister becomes a wife, a brother a husband, all to preserve a myth of divine purity. The court hums with propaganda, priests and advisors weaving tales of godly lineage, but the truth is in the nursery. Children born with the same elongated skulls as Akhenaten's daughters, the same frail bones as Tutankhamun. Infants who don't survive their first year. Their tiny mummies buried in secret to hide the dynasty's shame. By the time Cleopatra is born in 69 BCE, the Ptolemies have perfected this genetic catastrophe. Her family tree is a nightmare of repetition, the same names looping endlessly as siblings marry siblings. She's not just the product of one incestuous union, she's the culmination of 250 years of them. Her parents are siblings, her grandparents are siblings, and so on back through centuries. The result is a bloodline so concentrated that family members are simultaneously siblings, cousins, parents, and children to each other. The myth of Cleopatra's beauty, her seductive charm, is likely just that, a myth. After generations of inbreeding, she probably carried the same physical markers as her ancestors: pronounced facial features, a misaligned jaw, a body struggling under the weight of genetic decay. Her legendary allure was political necessity, not reality. What made her extraordinary was her mind, sharp, multilingual, a master of strategy in a world that wanted her dead. Cleopatra's brilliance was her rebellion against her bloodline's curse. She spoke 9 languages, studied philosophy, navigated the snake pit of Roman politics with a skill that outshone healthy kings. But even her genius couldn't undo the damage in her veins. Her relationships with Julius Caesar and Mark Antony weren't just alliances, they were desperate attempts to break the cycle. Their children, born of fresh Roman blood, were healthier, stronger, a flicker of hope for a lineage on the brink of collapse. But Rome's politics were as brutal as Egypt's genetics. Octavian, the future Augustus, saw these children as threats to his power. One by one they were eliminated, their potential snuffed out in the shadow of Rome's ambition. With them died the last chance to save the Ptolemaic line. When Cleopatra chooses death in 30 BCE, clutching a snake, or so the stories say, she ends more than her life. She ends a dynasty, a 250-year experiment in genetic isolation that mirrored Egypt's ancient tragedy. Her suicide is almost merciful compared to the slow poison of her bloodline. She dies as the last pharaoh, her body a living archive of centuries of inbreeding. The irony is brutal. The Ptolemies, foreign conquerors, came to Egypt with dreams of eternal rule. Instead, they were conquered by the very tradition they adopted, destroyed by the same obsession that doomed their predecessors. Egypt's gods didn't need to curse them, they cursed themselves. This pattern isn't just a story of one dynasty, it's a cycle, repeating across Egypt's history like a heartbeat of destruction. The Old Kingdom saw occasional sibling marriages, laying the foundation for disaster. The Middle Kingdom turned to foreign brides, bringing health and stability, only for the New Kingdom to plunge back into inbreeding with Akhenaten's family. After Amarna's collapse, later pharaohs married Nubians, Libyans, foreigners, their mummies showing stronger bones, longer lives. But the Ptolemies, seduced by Egypt's myths, repeated the mistake with devastating precision. Each cycle taught the same lesson: diversity strengthens, isolation destroys. Yet each new ruler, drunk on power, believed their blood was too precious to mix. This isn't just ancient history, it's a warning carved in bone. The pharaoh's obsession with purity wasn't just genetic, it was psychological, a control system that trapped them in their own dogma. The priests, the advisors, the entire palace machine fed the lie, convincing kings their suffering was divine. It's a pattern you can still see today in systems that demand loyalty over truth, that prize ideology over reality. The pharaohs weren't just victims of bad genes, they were prisoners of a mindset that valued power over people, and that mindset didn't die with Cleopatra. You're holding this knowledge now, a truth that cuts through the propaganda of power. It's not just about Egypt, it's about every system that asks you to sacrifice your humanity for a lie. You wrote "Break the Bloodline" in the comments, didn't you? That was your first step, a declaration that you see through the illusions. Do it again if you haven't. Write it twice. Let it sink into your bones. You're not just watching a video, you're awakening to a truth that changes how you see the world. The next layer is even darker, where we uncover the human cost, not just of broken bodies, but of minds and souls crushed by a system that demanded everything and gave nothing back. Keep going, the truth is waiting. You're in the heart of the abyss now, where the light of reason barely reaches and the weight of Egypt's forbidden truth presses against your soul. You've seen Cleopatra's desperate fight against a poisoned bloodline, the Ptolemies' catastrophic mimicry of Egypt's ancient sin, and the cycles of destruction that consume dynasty after dynasty. But this isn't just about broken bodies or fallen kings, it's about the human cost, the invisible scars carved into minds and spirits by a system that demanded divinity at the expense of humanity. You're holding a dangerous truth, one that reveals how power twists not just flesh, but the very essence of who we are. Let's peel back the final layer of this gilded lie and face the psychological horror of living as a god in a body that betrays you. Imagine waking each morning in a palace of marble and gold, your every step shadowed by servants who call you divine, but your spine screams with pain before your feet touch the floor. Your jaw aches with every bite of breakfast, Ibrios. Your breath shallow in a chest that never formed right. You're worshipped as a god, but your body feels like a cage, each movement a reminder of your fragility. This was the reality for Egypt's royal children, born into a world where their blood was called sacred, yet it carried a curse no prayer could lift. They weren't just prisoners of their genes, they were prisoners of a myth that isolated them from the world, from love, from truth. Royal children grew up in a golden prison, separated from others by their supposed divinity. They couldn't play with common children, couldn't form real friendships, couldn't escape the weight of their bloodline. Their only companions were siblings who mirrored their own deformities, cousins who would become their spouses, a family bound by a shared curse. Picture a young prince, his face marked by the same elongated features as his sister, watching her across a banquet hall. He knows she'll be his wife one day, not out of choice, but because the priests say it's the will of Ra. The psychological toll is unimaginable. Love twisted into duty, intimacy poisoned by obligation. They grow up knowing something is wrong, seeing their siblings die young, their cousins born with twisted limbs, but no one explains why. The gods demand purity, and purity demands silence. For royal women, the suffering was even sharper. Every pregnancy was a gamble with death, not just their own, but their child's. Would this baby live past its first breath? Would it bear the same deformities that mark the family? Palace records hint at queens who retreated from public life, their spirits broken by stillbirths and miscarriages. Some turned to wine or opium, seeking escape from the pain of watching their children die. Their wombs turned into battlegrounds for a losing war. The priests called these losses divine will, but the mothers knew better. They saw the pattern. Infants who survived the womb rarely survived childhood, their tiny bodies too weak to carry the genetic burden. Yet the system demanded they try again, marry their brother, bear another child, perpetuate the lie. The men weren't spared either. Princes grew up surrounded by temple walls painted with images of perfect pharaohs, broad-shouldered, strong, divine. Their own reflections showed something else. Crooked spines, weak lungs, faces that didn't match the myth. They were told they were gods, but they felt human, frail, trapped. Court artists faced an impossible task. How do you paint a god-king who can barely walk? They solved it with stylization, creating images that hid the truth in idealized forms. But the royal physicians knew better. Their records, etched on papyrus, catalogued the horrors: bone deformities, immune deficiencies, hormonal imbalances that stunted growth or warped development. They didn't know genetics, but they saw the symptom: frequent illnesses, wounds that wouldn't heal, minds that struggled with learning or mood. Every generation grew worse, the damage compounding like a debt no one could pay. This wasn't just physical, it was psychological warfare. The royal family lived in a world where everyone they loved looked wrong, felt wrong, died wrong. They saw the portraits of their ancestors, the same strange features staring back across centuries. They noticed the high infant mortality, the barren queens, the princes who died before 20. Deep down, they must have suspected the truth, but the system, priests, advisors, tradition, demanded they ignore it. To question the practice was to question the gods, and to question the gods was to unravel the empire. So they carried on, marrying their siblings, burying their children, praying to gods who offered no answers. Modern science reveals what they couldn't see. Sibling marriages increase the odds of inheriting 2 copies of harmful recessive genes, 25% for each child, compounding with every generation. In a diverse population, these genes are rare, masked by healthy variants. But in Egypt's royal families, inbreeding turned these hidden flaws into visible disasters. The elongated skulls and misaligned jaws in royal art weren't stylistic choices, they were genetic reality, defects so severe they couldn't be hidden. Beneath the surface, the damage was worse. Compromised immune systems that turned minor infections deadly, neurological issues that altered behavior, hormonal imbalances that made adulthood a struggle. Each generation amplified the flaws of the last, a spiral of destruction no one could stop because no one could name it. This pattern wasn't constant, it ebbed and flowed, a cycle of ruin and recovery. The Old Kingdom saw occasional inbreeding, planting the seeds of disaster. The Middle Kingdom brought foreign marriages, fresh blood that strengthened the royal line. Mummies from this period show healthier bones, longer lives, fewer deformities, but power breeds arrogance, and by the New Kingdom, inbreeding returned with a vengeance. Akhenaten's family was a high point of genetic collapse, their art a raw document of decay. Later dynasties turned to foreign brides again, Nubians, Libyans, Near Eastern royalty, restoring stability until the Ptolemies arrived, seduced by Egypt's myths into repeating the same mistake. Each cycle taught the same lesson: diversity is strength, isolation is death. Yet each new dynasty, blinded by power, fell into the trap. This is where the truth cuts deepest. The pharaohs weren't just victims of biology, they were victims of a system that valued ideology over humanity. The priests and advisors weren't just wrong, they were complicit, weaving a myth of divine purity that justified suffering. This wasn't ignorance, it was control, a psychological cage that kept the royal family obedient to a lie. And it's not just ancient history. You see echoes of this today, systems that demand loyalty over truth, that sacrifice people for the sake of power. You wrote, "Break the bloodline" in the comments, a vow to see through those lies. If you haven't, do it now, twice, to burn it into your mind. You're not just learning history, you're learning to question every system that asks you to trade your humanity for a myth. The final descent awaits, where we uncover what this tragedy teaches us about power, truth, and the cost of blindness. Stay with me. The truth is almost yours. You've reached the deepest chamber of this forbidden truth, where the echoes of Egypt's royal tragedy reverberate like a warning across millennia. The air is heavy now, not just with dust, but with the weight of a revelation that strips away the illusions of power. You've walked through the shattered lives of Akhenaten, Tutankhamun, Cleopatra, gods in name, but prisoners of a lie that twisted their bodies and souls. This isn't just history. It's a mirror held up to every system that demands you sacrifice truth for power, humanity for ideology. As we stand among these golden tombs, the final truth emerges. The pharaoh's greatest legacy isn't their pyramids or their gods, it's the lesson of what happens when you worship a lie. Let's uncover the final piece, the one that binds their suffering to our world, and ask what it means for you. Look again at Tutankhamun's golden mask, its serene eyes hiding the agony of a boy who died too young. Look at Cleopatra's coins, her face etched with strength she had to invent to survive a bloodline that betrayed her. These weren't just people, they were warnings, their bodies a testament to the cost of blind devotion. The pharaohs thought they were preserving divinity, but they were conducting a 3,000-year experiment in self-destruction. Each dynasty, from the Old Kingdom to the Ptolemies, fell into the same trap. They believed their blood was too sacred to mix, their power too great to question. They were wrong, and their children paid the price: crooked spines, barren wombs, lives cut short by a curse they called divine. This cycle wasn't just genetic, it was psychological, a system of control that turned palaces into prisons. The priests and advisors weren't just wrong, they were architects of a myth that kept the royal family chained. To marry outside the bloodline was to defy the gods, to risk the empire's collapse. So the pharaohs obeyed, marrying their sisters, watching their children die, and calling it holy. The system demanded loyalty, not truth, and it crushed anyone who dared look beyond the lie. Akhenaten tried, rejecting the old gods for a new one, but even he couldn't escape the cage of his blood. Cleopatra fought with her mind, seeking fresh blood through Roman alliances, but Rome's politics were as merciless as Egypt's genes. The system always won because it was built to silence doubt. The evidence is carved in stone and bone. Royal mummies, studied by modern scientists, show the truth no priest could hide. Elongated skulls, malformed ji, immune systems so weak that a cold could kill. DNA analysis of Tutankhamun's remains in 2010 revealed a boy ravaged by inbreeding, his body a map of his ancestors' mistakes. The Ptolemies, 250 years of sibling marriages, left a family tree so tangled it was a genetic death sentence. Yet the cycle wasn't constant. Periods of foreign marriages, Nubian, Libyan, Near Eastern, brought health, stability, longer lives. Mummies from these times show stronger bones, fewer deformities, but power breeds arrogance, and arrogance breeds isolation. Each time a dynasty grew strong, it turned inward, convinced its blood was too precious to share, and each time it collapsed. This pattern isn't just ancient, it's universal. It's the story of every system that demands purity over truth, loyalty over reason. The pharaoh's obsession with divine blood mirrors the dogmas we see today, ideologies that ask you to ignore evidence, to sacrifice your humanity for a cause. The priests who justified inbreeding are no different from the voices that demand blind allegiance now, whether to tradition, power, or fear. The royal children, trapped in their golden cages, are every person forced to live a lie because the system leaves no room for truth. You feel it, don't you? That unease, that spark of recognition. You've seen it in your world, rules that don't make sense, truths you're not supposed to question, systems that thrive on silence. But here's the dangerous knowledge, the kind that changes you forever. You can break the cycle. The pharaohs couldn't, not because they lacked power, but because they lacked understanding. They didn't have genetics, didn't know that diversity strengthens while isolation destroys. You do. Modern science, born from their suffering, tells us what they couldn't see. Every harmful gene needs variation to stay hidden. Inbreeding strips that variation away, turning flaws into disasters. The pharaoh's mummies are more than relics. They are textbooks, teaching us that no amount of power can defy nature's laws. Their pain gave us wisdom, their tragedy gave us truth. What would they say if they could speak? Akhenaten might warn you about the cost of fanaticism, how even a rebel king couldn't escape the system's grip. Tutankhamun might beg you to value health over pride, to see his walking sticks not as symbols of power but as cries for help. Cleopatra might urge you to choose love over lineage, to fight for a future untainted by the past. Their voices, silenced by time, still echo in their bones, preserved for us to learn from. They wanted to be gods, but they became humanity's greatest teachers, showing us that no ideology, no tradition, no power is worth sacrificing truth. You're standing at the edge of their tombs now, the weight of their story in your hands. You wrote "Break the Bloodline" in the comments, didn't you? That was your vow to reject the lies that bind, to see through the systems that demand your silence. If you haven't, do it now, twice, to claim this truth as yours. This isn't just about Egypt. It's about every moment you felt the pressure to conform, to ignore what's right in front of you. The pharaoh's greatest gift wasn't their pyramids, it was their failure. A warning to choose humanity over dogma, health over pride, truth over power. As you leave this tomb, carry their lesson with you. The world is full of systems that ask you to bow, to believe without question, to sacrifice your mind for their myths. But you've seen what happens when power blinds you to truth. You've seen the cost in broken bodies, shattered minds, dynasties reduced to dust. The pharaohs thought they were eternal, but they were human just like you. Their suffering wasn't meaningless if you learn from it. So take this knowledge, this dangerous, forbidden truth, and let it change you. Question the systems that demand your loyalty. Seek the truth no matter how deep it's buried, and never ever let a lie become your god.